It was the first test of nerves, the warships passing a few miles from Iranian soil. But if Iraq chooses to renew its attack on their oil lifeline, Tehran would almost certainly retaliate, bringing the Americans closer to a showdown. As we passed, there was a radio warning to get out of the field. The boat then appeared to give chase.
This is Navy Warship 2-4. We have no comments.
The Royal Navy's kept 2 ships close to the Gulf since 1980, but it was only last September that they began accompanying British merchant ships through the dangerous Strait of Hormuz. That followed a big increase in attacks on tankers by Iran and Iraq. Now the Royal Navy keeps 3 warships in the area, 2 on operations and the 3rd in reserve. With them is a Royal Fleet Auxiliary tanker, which is the radio communications link with the merchant ships. Use of the Royal Navy's protection has grown dramatically. Last September, just 3 merchant ships contacted the Navy for help. Last month, 181 did. Since January, the Royal Navy has accompanied 119 British registered ships through the Strait of Hormuz, within a few miles of the Iranian coast and the batteries of new Chinese missiles being installed there. The Royal Navy has frequent verbal contact with Iranian naval patrols in international waters. The Navy hopes its very presence will deter an attack on the British vessels. The warships keep ready for instant action in the Gulf. They can't use their weapons until an attack has actually been launched, but are ready to retaliate in strength.
The order to raise anchors and set course for Kuwait was the long-awaited signal that America was ready to escort the massive tanker Bridgeton and the smaller Gas Prince through come what may in the following days. With temperatures soaring to at least 120 degrees, the task force sweated it out as the ships passed safely through the narrow strait. Tensions rising as they came within range of the Iranian Silkworm missiles. With the ships bearing extra-large American flags just visible amidships, they crawled through the 25-mile-wide strait. They were inside Iranian territorial waters, but there was no sign of any interference. The Iranian Navy, however, active in checking on shipping in the previous 24 hours, seems to have ignored the convoy, which is now steaming safely towards Kuwait. Although they're through the first hazard, the convoy is by no means safe. Ahead, over the next 2 days, the ships could come under attack at any time during the 500-mile voyage. Iran has recently used chilling rhetoric, threatening to turn the Gulf red with American blood. But so far their policy has been strictly one of retaliation, only when their ships or oil installations are attacked, and for very good reason. In classic convoy formation, the tankers and naval escorts came safely through the Strait of Hormuz, unchallenged by the Iranians in whose territorial waters they had sailed. It was the first test of nerves, the warships passing a few miles from Iranian soil, the convoy easily within range of Iran's Silkworm missiles, and most certainly in full radar view. With temperatures over 120 degrees, the task force sweated it out, tension rising aboard as the vessels steamed through the first hazard. The escorts have now extended the exclusion area to more than 5 miles for television crews. But surprisingly, wooden-made dhows, some from Iran, which are used extensively in the Gulf for fishing or moving cargo, were drifting to within 2 miles of the convoy, and there was no apparent effort to warn them off. With the ships now bearing extra-large American flags just visible amidships, the naval group is tonight performing a series of defensive maneuvers to guide the tankers through come what may during the next 500 miles. Although now past the Silkworms, the convoy is far from safe and could come under air or sea attack during the next 48 hours. The hope is that the Iranians will keep their distance, but with escort operations planned to continue for months ahead, it's feared that the unpredictability of the near 7-year Gulf War may eventually entangle the Americans. Tehran's leaders have already used chilling rhetoric against Washington, threatening to turn the Gulf red with American blood. So far, however, their policy has been strictly one of retaliation for Iraq's attacks on their oil business, and for very good reason. With Iran totally dependent on the Gulf for their exports and imports, it's not in their interest to turn the waters into a battlefield. But if Iraq chooses to renew its attack on their oil lifeline, Tehran would almost certainly retaliate, thus bringing the Americans closer to a showdown. Brent Sadler, News at 10, Kuwait.
In Washington, the policy argument over the Gulf is for the moment over, and the political community here can only wait for events to unfold. There's some public concern about the possibility of America being drawn into conflict with Iran, but it's muted.
Sure, I'm concerned, but I think the Gulf situation has gone on too long, and some action needs to be taken.
I think it's a very explosive situation.
At least some of our allies, like France, I believe, is escorting tankers now because of their conflict with their embassies. And I think it's a good policy.
I think that they may make matters worse.
The White House says that the president is being kept closely briefed on the operation now underway in the Gulf. The administration may want to present a calm face to the world, but it's clear that at the very least, the president is watching events in the Gulf with some anxiety. Edward Sturton, ITN, Washington.
Gulf shipping, the US warships in particular, have heeded the Iranian warnings and steered clear of Operation Martyrdom. So far, there have been no reported incidents. American warships on station midway in the Gulf have been keeping a close radar watch on the maneuvers. This position only 35 miles from the Iranians' war exclusion zone. On board the frigate Clackering, spirits appeared high. The sailors were not on battle stations, but the deck watch was clearly on visual alert. Iranian naval activity has been picked up in several areas, but it's likely to be concentrated around Hormuz, where an Iranian warship has been seen. Further up the Gulf, a dormant Iranian oil installation, destroyed by repeated Iraqi airstrikes over the past 12 months. The Sasan field no longer pumps oil, but it's widely suspected of being an Iranian observation platform or an operational base for naval units of the Revolutionary Guards. An Iranian supply vessel was tied up alongside the ghost rig. As we passed, there was a radio warning to get out of the field. The boat then appeared to give chase, but turned away towards Iran. Gulf shippers now fear that vessels run the risk of accidentally steaming into Iranian waters during the exercise. They say it's not unusual for ships to stray in the bottleneck of Hormuz. So captains are now acutely aware that their navigation will have to be spot on if they are to remain safely in the international sea lane, and many owners may choose to delay passage. The US ships, meanwhile, have been electronically observing the Iranian naval exercises, but their response to our questions was negative.
This is Navy Warship 2-4. We have no comments.
In the Gulf of Oman, other US warships are awaiting orders to continue their escort duties to Kuwait, and it's reported that 3 more Kuwaiti tankers re-registered with the US are now on their way to the Gulf. The Navy has now adopted a holding position, the operational plans delayed until the task group is reinforced with mine-hunting ships and helicopters. Though Gas Prince is now safely out of the Gulf, the Navy has yet to recover the supertanker Bridgeton. The potential threat against her now judged to be very high. Brent Sadler, ITN, in the Persian Gulf.
The danger posed to the world shipping is now all too visible in the Gulf of Oman. Today, patrol boats from the Emirates were able to locate more of the mines which have been laid there. But with British minesweepers still weeks away, the Western powers now have no way of guaranteeing safe passage for their tankers. Indeed, this afternoon, after failing to detonate one mine with gunfire and then losing track of another, the Navy of the Emirates was reduced to asking foreign journalists to help them in their search. In Britain, the Royal Navy recalled ratings from holiday as the 4 minesweepers bound for the war zone were refitted at Rosyth. At such short notice, much of their training will take place as they sail south towards Suez. Ratings were confident about mine hunting, but decidedly nervous about more conventional warfare.
We're well prepared for the mine hunting tasks. I think we could carry those out quite well. But then if the trouble starts, on air attacks or whatever, then I think obviously a little ship like this, we haven't got really much to protect ourselves.
The Prime Minister on holiday in Cornwall defended the government's decision to send them, although the mere mention of the crisis in the Gulf seemed to touch a raw nerve.
Will you be keeping in touch with events in the Gulf while you're here?
Oh, of course. Of course.
And what about the apparent U-turn? Any views on
Well, we're not, in fact. I simply don't understand the language you use. If there are mines, and there are British ships, naval, and tankers, then why do you find it so surprising that you send minesweepers?
It's been said, though, that you're bowing to the Americans.
We're on holiday.
Have you been bowing to the Americans?
The Iranians will tease the West. They'll send mines. They'll attack ships, which will embarrass the West. They'll call these maneuvers, then extend them by a day. They'll resort to all sorts of things that will keep the West on an edge, as it were. But it's very unlikely that they'll get involved in a major confrontation with the British, French, and American navies. However, there are elements in Iran, in the Revolutionary Guards, who have their own navy, who could well try hit-and-run attacks on American ships. And if things get tenser, there's always the possibility of what one could call an Islamic Pearl Harbor, that they will throw everything they've got at an American aircraft carrier, in the hope that by damaging it or sinking it, they will so alter American public opinion that the Americans will pull out, as the Americans pulled out of Lebanon back in '83 when the suicide attacks on the American Marines took place.
In the circumstances, do you see any hope in diplomacy at the moment, from whatever source?
There's no hope in diplomacy producing an end to the war at this time. There is some hope that by keeping up the diplomatic game, the UN, and particularly the Secretary General, can provide a channel for Iran to come to the peace table when it wishes to do so. But what you've had at the moment is a UN resolution calling for peace, followed by actions by the West, which are seen by Iran as hostile to it.
The mines found in the Gulf in the past 2 days raise any number of questions. Not least why the Iranians would lay a floating minefield in shipping lanes used by tankers, conveying oil from their own refineries. The most likely explanation is that the more militant factions within the country wish to force a head-on confrontation with the West. If so, the fate of the Western navies depends as much on the outcome of the battle for power in Tehran as their ability to deal with the threat at sea. In the circumstances, there are those, notably the West Germans, the Italians and the Dutch, who now believe that the only solution lies in creating a truly multinational force under the auspices of the UN. In their view, only such a coordinated response from the West can avert disaster in the weeks ahead.
Mr. Karashami, what is the message that's been brought from Tehran to Perez de Cuellar?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful. I believe the content of the message to Mr. Perez de Cuellar is not any different from the written message which was already submitted to him, and it is circulated as a document of the Security Council.
You mean there's been no change in Iran's attitude towards the resolution calling for a ceasefire?
I think the position has been very consistent and more or less the same.
Well, what is the position now? Can you tell me briefly?
The position, I think since it is already circulated as a document, there is no need to really elaborating on that very much. We have seen some positive elements in the resolution. We have also seen very important negative aspects in the resolutions. We believe the resolution is therefore suffering from very important shortcomings, and but if it is an instrument to encourage the Secretary General to make a move and to see how the ultimate objective, which is the restoration of peace and tranquility to the region, can be achieved, then that is a very good objective, and we hope that through cooperation with his good officers we can achieve something.
Are you asking the Secretary General today to embark upon a personal mission?
I cannot be very specific. That is exactly what we mentioned in the written letter we have given to the Secretary General and which is circulated as a document.
Have you asked him again to visit Tehran?
We reiterated our invitation, which is a standing invitation indeed.
Are we getting any closer to Iran accepting the UN ceasefire call?
I cannot be specific about these issues because I don't know how far you have been, and I don't know with what criteria I should measure if you are closer or not. We believe that the positive elements in the resolution must be appreciated very much, and anything which can be done must be done within the framework of those positive elements.
Of course, there are those who believe that Iran is trying to play for time to stave off an arms embargo for as long as possible, while at the same time getting its oil out, taking advantage of the lull in the Gulf.
Oh, is that so? then let them interpret the situation in any way they want, but definitely a very, very important decision with regard to the most complicated issue of the region should not be made without painful and hair-splitting and accurate analysis and studies, and it takes time. Now, meanwhile, if during this period of considerations and deliberations some sort of tranquility is prevailing in the Persian Gulf, that should not be interpreted in any way as a negative outcome.
Are you saying that the way things are looking, with fears of a direct confrontation in the Gulf seemingly unfounded, and with the diplomatic initiative that we've seen today from Tehran, that we could be moving towards the end of this long war?
The end of this long war has been one of the ultimate aspirations, important aspirations of the Islamic Republic of Iran. As a matter of fact, we believe that this war should not have started at all, and it is imposed on us, and we are the party which are definitely paying the heavy price of it for no good reasons, simply because we have to defend ourselves. Now, but what is going to happen in the Persian Gulf particularly is a bit more complicated than the issue of the war at large, because the presence of so many forces, foreign forces in the Persian Gulf, has increased the tension in that part of the world very highly, and it has become a very, very dangerous, explosive situation. And regrettably, all that explosive nature has been built up immediately after the adoption of the resolution, and therefore the resolution has not been able to address itself effectively with regard to this sad and dangerous situation which has come about in the Persian Gulf. I therefore believe that the issue of the Persian Gulf as such deserves a very special and even independent attention if the international body wishes to be constructive with regard to its mandate, maintaining, peace, international peace and security. And we hope that the issue of the Persian Gulf will be treated with the same merit by the international body.
Are you saying that an international force in the Gulf would be acceptable to Iran?
Not exactly. We want the Security Council, the international organizations, whoever they are, not to close their eyes with regard to the presence of the, as a matter of fact, unnecessary and very dangerous presence of the foreign forces in the Persian Gulf. If the idea of the peace and security in the region is honestly the objective of the international body, therefore the spread of the conflict should be treated as a sort of contradiction to that objective, and therefore everybody should mobilize its effort in order to expel all the foreign forces from the Persian Gulf and make sure that another outbreak of a very serious, dangerous conflict does not happen over there. That's what we mean.
There is a view, however, that the presence of these of the American forces in the Gulf is preventing Iraq restarting the tanker war, and that is directly in Iran's interest because your oil output is high and the money you're making from your revenues is high.
We think that the American presence in the Persian Gulf is not addressed against Iraq. The Americans might have been ultimately come to the conclusion that they have to prevent Iraq from attacking our vessels in order to make sure that no military action, retaliatory action would be taken by Iran against others in the Persian Gulf. If this is the logic that the Americans have been following, therefore their military presence is absolutely irrelevant. They could have imposed the same pressure upon Iraq without their fleets in the Persian Gulf. After all, everybody knows that those fleets have come there in order to help Iraq and not to be used against Iraq. And as a whole, the imposition of pressure on Iraq remains somehow irrelevant so far as the military presence of the United States in the Persian Gulf is concerned, or else we have to rightly interpret the presence of those forces only against ourselves.
If, as a result of the diplomatic moves that are taking place between yourselves and the Secretary General, there is some new initiative now, when would you expect the world to know of some results?
When those results come to a mature state and tangible conclusion, it is very difficult to speculate on in preliminary rudimentary talks which have started, and I don't think that it should be we should be very hasty in expecting a miracle all of a sudden. It is a very, very complicated situation. It's a matter of war and peace. It is the security of my country which has been in jeopardy, and it is the same security which means for us more importantly than anything else. Therefore, we cannot simply jump to a hasty conclusion and say, yes, tomorrow you are going to see something.
Mr. Khorashani, thank you very much for speaking to us.
Thank you.
In London, the insurance underwriters at Lloyd's were today being kept up to date with the latest attacks in the intensified tanker war. The market here carries 90% of the Gulf war risks business. They've paid out £1 billion in losses since the war began, and only yesterday raised their premiums for tankers entering the Gulf by 50%. A delegation from the Merchant Navy Officers Union Newmast had their members' safety in mind when they went to the American Embassy this afternoon. They want a United Nations naval force to replace the US presence in the Gulf, which they say puts British sailors' lives at risk.
It is escalating the situation at the present time. We now have the largest war zone that we've ever had. It's spilled out of the Gulf now into the Gulf of Oman, where we find the mines.
But many tanker owners support foreign naval escorts.
What is happening in the Gulf are a lot of neutral merchant ships going about their lawful business, trading to many places other than those engaged in the war. And they have a perfect right to carry on that business without having a hole shot in them.
Hundreds of British families, like the Stewarts of Minehead, have had to live with the anxieties of the tanker war. Liz Stewart's husband, Roger, commands a vessel now on its way to the Gulf, and he was there earlier in the year.
He worries about us, the children. I think, as he says, he knows, when he's away, he knows what's going on, and he realises that we don't so much, and therefore it's probably worse for us at home.
HMS Broadsword, one of the Royal Navy warships which have been accompanying British tankers in the Gulf, sailed into her home port of Plymouth today. The family's relief at seeing the crewmen back safely was all too obvious. The men have now got a few weeks of leave before embarking again on their next tour, though they won't be sent back to the Gulf for at least another year.
The BT Banker, a crude oil carrier of 340,000 tons, is the 21st British ship that HMS Andromeda has accompanied in or out of the Gulf during the past month. In all, for Andromeda, over 2.5 million tons of British shipping seen safely on its way. Although no mines have been seen for weeks, the thin-skinned Navy frigates still follow in the precise wake of the tankers for their own protection. Sometime next week, the 4 British mine hunters are due to arrive in the Gulf. But with the mine threat apparently receding, it's not entirely clear what they'll do when they get here. So is the mine threat still a real one?
The mine threat will always be there, I believe. We know that the Iranians have got a vast stockpile of mines. We know that they are prepared to use them. When and where they're going to use them, of course, we don't know.
But for the Andromeda's crew, the mines are a small worry compared with the problem of coping with the Gulf's intense summer heat and humidity. The ship's steam-driven, and in the boiler room, the mechanics can only survive 3 hours at a time.
On the bottom plates at the moment, under the fans, you're talking about 120 degrees Fahrenheit. Top plates in front of the steam drum, about 158, 160 degrees Fahrenheit. When we're back in UK with colder climate, you're probably talking between about 70 to about 110 degrees Fahrenheit under the fans. It's a job that we like doing, but we don't like the temperatures.
You'd rather be doing it somewhere other than the Gulf, would you?
Oh yeah, back in UK, any day.
The complaint's the same working out on the open deck.
This heat, what are you looking forward to most?
Getting home to the rain and the ice and the snow and the cold.
And the wife.
And the wife.
In the war zone, the Royal Navy insists the sailors wear long fire-resistant overalls, a lesson from the Falklands War, but it makes the heat worse. Meanwhile, outside the Gulf, a Soviet destroyer at anchor was allowing its sailors to cool off in shorts in a lull between escorting Soviet merchantmen. Under a canopy at the stern, a barbecue seemed to be underway. On the top deck of an accompanying support vessel, a crewman took a makeshift shower bath. Apart from the Americans, the foreign navies in the Gulf have successfully avoided involvement in the war here. British frigates make a bold display of their neutrality. On HMS Andromeda, the crew hope they'll keep out of the war, separation from home and the heat being the only problems they have to face, with nothing to stop them being home for Christmas. Jeffrey Archer, ITN, with the Royal Navy in the Gulf.